Okay, perfect. I think we're ready to get started. All of you should be able to see the blue screen now. My name is Dustin Nest. I'm the technical trainer here at StreamNative. Today is actually going to be full of demos, and there are demos that you could technically follow along to, but I'm going to suggest that you watch for the most part, and then I'll give you all the resources you need to be able to do it after today, or after the call. So I'm going to start it with a short introduction to Pulsar and StreamNative because I want to really get to the hands-on section really fast. I'm going to introduce you to our new developer portal and our StreamNative Academy course catalog. There's a series of free courses that we're going to actually kind of go through examples of today. And then there's more examples in those courses that you're able to take after the call. And then I'm going to be able to help you out with any of those if you have questions in the future. But we also do have a paid developer and a paid operations course as well. But today's going to be mostly filled with lots of demos. I'm going to show you how to create a StreamNative Pulsar cluster today using a $200 credit. You're going to have the option of either creating a serverless or a dedicated cluster in our hosted cloud. Serverless is a new option that is just being announced today, and we'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit later. We also have then for training a Kafka quick start, so how to publish our first messages with the Kafka protocol, and the Pulsar quick start, how to publish our first messages with the Pulsar protocol. We're actually going to go through the Pulsar one today, and I'm probably going to have time to demo the Kafka produce and consume today as well. So what you're going to really get today is a full end-to-end demo of if you have never used StreamNative or Pulsar before, how you're going to be able to spin up a cluster for free, create your service accounts, and then start publishing Pulsar and Kafka messages. And then by the end of that, you'll be able to go through the quick starts and learn more about the features of Pulsar, like subscriptions and multi-tenancy. And Kafka, if you're a Kafka user, you'll learn how to use our multi-tenancy and geo-replication and things like that. So you're going to really have an opportunity to see how quickly you can get started using StreamNative and either with Pulsar or Kafka. And so the goal is to really do that in under about 30 to 45 minutes for today's webinar. And then after that, I'll give you information on how to contact sales when you need to learn how to scale or to start building large applications, how we can help you. And then continue training and more resources and how you can keep getting help from me after the webinar. So if you aren't familiar with Pulsar, it's a distributed open source messaging and streaming platform. It was originally developed by Yahoo, and it's now maintained by the Apache Software Foundation. There's a lot of amazing features in Pulsar, but we have extremely low latency, support for a large number of topics, over 1 million, and I believe with Oxia, it's going to end up being over 10 million. We've built-in multi-tenancy, horizontal scalability, and load balancing, because everything is built directly as cloud native on Kubernetes. Geo-replication is built into the platform. I have some various YouTube videos showing how to enable that. The compute and storage layers are separate, which helps with scalability, scaling things up and down quickly. And there's a lot of amazing features in addition to that. I do have a course on courses.streamnative.io. This is going to be one of the 2 main websites I'm going to keep pointing you to today. There's a course called Introduction to StreamNative and Apache Pulsar on that website. It's at the very top. If you click into it, you'll get to this page that has my face. And on the left pane, you'll see that there's key Pulsar features. There's short descriptions of all of those amazing features of Pulsar. And then there's a section about Succeed with StreamNative, and you can learn how StreamNative can help you. This is a little bit less technical, and when I say that, I mean it's still technical, but there's no coding in that course. It's more informational for you to learn about Pulsar and StreamNative. So I'm going to go through Pulsar and StreamNative pretty quickly today because I want to focus on developer items. But if you want to learn more, it's available there in that course. And then StreamNative. StreamNative is a messaging and streaming platform that is powered by Apache Pulsar, but we have a lot of additional amazing features on top of that. We've been working a ton on adding Kafka compatibility, which we will talk about today. We were founded in 2019 by the original creators of Pulsar, and that's actually very important to note. Because if you look at the timeline on the bottom, you'll see that Apache Kafka was built in 2011 at LinkedIn, and in 2015 is when Kubernetes really started. Apache Pulsar was built after Kubernetes, so we're actually built for the cloud and for Kubernetes, which is what gives us that amazing scalability. StreamNative solves various problems that other platforms can't around cost, availability, and performance, and the option to choose which of those are important to you and which tenants. So that's going to go a little bit beyond what today's webinar is about. But if you do want to learn about that, there's a section at the end where I'm going to have information on how you can contact sales. And they will be able to talk to you about your specific needs and applications and how to scale that out in a cost-effective way. So total cost of ownership is a big thing with Pulsar and StreamNative. And again, there's more information in that courses.streamnative.io course for Introduction to StreamNative and Apache Pulsar that you can learn about StreamNative. Before I get into actually demoing the one StreamNative platform at the core of it, we are supporting Kafka and Pulsar, but there's a lot more. There's a whole series of connectors. And today we're also, in addition to serverless, we're also announcing the release of the support for Kafka Connect and some built-in Kafka connectors directly in our platform. We also have the large range of client libraries. I tend to focus on Java, but there's a lot of client libraries in addition to that, as well as the support for Kafka. We are, give me one second. We have support for Lakehouse storage. So I have some demos on YouTube for moving data directly into, for instance, an S3 bucket in a Delta Lake open format. So other applications like Databricks can directly read that data while it's still accessible to StreamNative consumers, as well as Iceberg. We do connect with other platforms like Flink and Spark. There are what are called connectors, which aren't our traditional connectors, but they go in your Flink or Spark code that allow you to quickly connect to topics. We have lightweight stream processing like Pulsar functions or PF/SQL, and then the protocol handlers, and mainly we tend to focus a lot on Pulsar and Kafka, but there are others. But for instance, Kafka is actually embedded directly in our broker, so it actually is kind of a first-class citizen almost inside of a Pulsar cluster. Before we move on to the demos, I also want to talk about our licensing options. As I had mentioned, today we are announcing the serverless option, which is going to be billed based on throughput, while we still have what was traditionally the hosted option, which is now called dedicated. We also have a BYOC option where you get to use your cloud account and your cloud resources, and then our API server can reach out to your cloud account and deploy and control and maintain your BYOC cluster. We also have a completely private cloud option where it's going to be in your cloud, but because of security reasons, you may want it completely restricted. So this is where if you start working today, I'm going to show how to spin up serverless clusters and dedicated clusters. They're very similar, almost identical on how they get spun up. But if when you start playing with them and you're like, I really like Pulsar's features, I really want to learn more, but I have additional security requirements, that's when you talk to our sales department and they discuss those security requirements and figure out which option is best for you. In particular, BYOC, if you want to use your cloud resources, and private cloud, if you're want your security locked down. So I want to introduce you today to the developer portal that we've been working on. This was released, I believe, last week. If you go to streamnative.io and click on the Learn tab at the top, so click on Learn and go to Training Developer Portal. This is where I want to orient developers to get as much information as they can about all of the resources that we have to get you started working with StreamNative. Today, we're going to be talking about this Apache Kafka Quick Start and the Apache Pulsar Quick Starts, which are going to give you directions on how to spin up your cluster, as well as how to produce and consume messages and then learn more. And I'm going to actually tell you specifically about beyond what we talk about today. You're going to learn in these two quick starts. We also have additional resources for you. The course catalog will also bring you to the quick starts. If you have Apache Kafka client, here's your code documentation for Apache Pulsar. In addition to the quick start and the code, we've got the instructor-led developer training as an option and the developer certification, and then additional information. So I would definitely highly suggest you go over to streamnative.io/dev portal, but you can always find it under Learn. If I go ahead and click on the course catalog here, that's that courses.streamnative.io website. And here's that introductory course and the 2 quick starts. If I click on Continue Study with Pulsar, I'm going to go ahead and log out so I get the same view as you do. I'm going to go to Continue Study, and then if you just go down to Welcome, you'll get to that course. There's no login required. You can just hop on over here and browse everything. And this is where it's going to explain how to spin up your cluster and things like that. And I want to actually start now with the demo. I've been 15 minutes of talking. I think it's time to do some demos. In fact, the rest of the webinar or workshop now is demos. So I'm going to start by showing you what it looks like when you go into streamnative.io. You're going to have to create an org, and then we're going to create your first instance and cluster. We'll create a service account. I'm going to create a super admin account, which has the highest privilege and has privilege over the whole org. But there is the ability to do multi-tenancy or to even go further into produce and consume messages. And then I'm going to show you how easy it is to get sample code from the UI, which is already completely pre-configured to connect to your cluster. Then we'll come back to this screen and I'll explain a little bit more about what else is available in the quick start beyond these first 3 items. So I actually am going to just head on over to streamnative.io and give you a demo of what it looks like when you spin up a cluster. So here we are back on streamnative.io. If I just go over to login, here I have an org. You'll be required to log in and create an org. What you're going to see here in select an instance is there's going to be no existing instances there for you yet. So you'll have to create your first one. I'm going to show you the process of creating an instance in a cluster. If you click the little plus icon here, there will be a create your first instance button there. It's going to bring us to a page that has 3 options. There's the serverless option here on the left, which is going to be build based off of throughput. There's the dedicated option, which is going to be, you're going to have dedicated resources, and you're going to have much more control over the sizing and configuration of your cluster. But for testing purposes, serverless is definitely a great option for you to start with today. You can follow along if you want in the webinar and create your account. Go ahead and create your org, and then try and create a serverless or dedicated cluster. But what I suggest really is to go ahead and just follow along or just watch what I'm doing today. We'll be posting the video on YouTube. You can follow along later. And then you're welcome to email me with any questions, which I'll be talking about a little bit later of how you can get in contact with me. But everything you're seeing today, I can be your resource on getting you up and running when you want to try this yourself. So when you do sign in, you're going to get a $200 free credit to use our clusters. Dedicated runs at around $500 a month for the smallest cluster size. So I would actually suggest that you use serverless. It's going to run you longer to do some testing. I'm not actually going to deploy serverless right now, but when I click on it, you're going to be given the ability to create an instance. I'm just going to call it instance. Right now, we only do serverless on Google Cloud, and there's 1 region right now. This is a brand new feature that we came out with today. And then basically, those are the only 2 things. You basically do the cluster config and the instance config and the cluster, just the name. And then all that I have in the lower right corner is the finish button. I have no other configurations. You're going to get a small cluster that can scale the number of brokers slightly, and you're going to end up on the rapid channel. The rapid channel is the feature is you're going to have the most current feature sets that are available, and we're always going to recommend using the rapid channel when you want to test Kafka, because we're doing a lot of development around Kafka. I'm going to hit cancel on this, so I don't want to spin up a serverless cluster. I'm going to show you the dedicated option. Deploy dedicated. So I'm going to say instance dedicated. You have options. For you, I suggest using Google Cloud and then using the region Europe West 1. I believe we've scaled up those. So if there's a lot of people trying to create clusters today, we have enabled extra pods in that for you to be able to create clusters. And then you can just say dedicated cluster. And you notice after choosing these 2, the instance and the cluster config, there's a cluster operations tab. So there's more configuration available for dedicated. There's the LTS channel, which is going to lag behind but be more stable because we're not pushing out the latest features to you. But if you're using Kafka, again, use the rapid channel. I would typically leave the feature set here as the defaults. Then you can go into cluster sizing where you can specifically choose sizing. If you especially go to advanced, you can see the number of brokers, the number of bookies. So those are your storage and serving layers and the sizes of them. The smallest cluster size is fine for testing for what we're doing today, and you can always go back in and edit that. But the smallest cluster size, again, runs at around $500 a month, and you do have the $200 free credit. I don't think I mentioned before, but when you use the credit, you won't have to put in a credit card to use that credit. So you really can just create an account in org and then go in and start creating a cluster. I'm actually going to hit finish on this, and it's going to start spinning up a dedicated cluster. Oh, I guess I already used one with the same name. We'll just say 2. We'll say 2 on both. That is my fault. And finish. See if it goes ahead and starts deploying it. The serverless clusters typically take about 1 or 2 minutes to spin up at most. There's actually pods available and ready. But the dedicated ones take a little bit longer because you're getting all of the pods spun up live for you of your zookeeper, your bookkeeper, and your brokers. So while this one's spinning up, what actually happens at the top here is we have to dig into our instance, our cluster, our tenant, and our namespace. So there's a series of levels. And then once you get to that last level of instance and namespace, we'll be able to get code out of the UI. When we get code out of the UI for both Pulsar clusters, Pulsar and Kafka code, it's going to be pre-populated with information about the cluster configuration that allows you to connect directly. We still need to create our service account, which is one thing I forgot. To get to the service accounts page, go to the top right corner and click on accounts and accesses. I'm going to go to new service account and I'm going to say demo account. And I'm going to create a super admin account for you. This is going to be important because this is going to give your code all of the permissions it needs to be able to access the server. This is still a very high level privilege though, so you wouldn't normally use this for producing and consuming messages. There's other levels of permissions that you could use. If you turned off super admin, you could then go in, create this account, and then give it permissions for things like tenant admin. So that would be a user who would be able to do tenant admin activities, like creating policies on namespaces, for instance. Or the account could have things like produce and consume permissions on the namespace level, which would give those types of permissions on all the topics in that namespace, or you could give produce and consume directly on topics. But really the purpose of the namespace is to back up one step and do groupings of topics that need similar permissions. But I'm going to do a confirm here on demo test. And I'm going to download its OAuth 2 key. Actually, it was demo account, excuse me. I'm going to download its OAuth 2 key. That's going to be needed for me to use the code that I'm going to get in the next step to get that code to connect to the server. Let me go back to my org. I created instance dedicated to and the cluster inside of it, but I'm actually going to work on the dedicated instance. But I'm going to go into the Pulsar clients code. It's going to let me in here. I know that. In the Java code here, if I go to next, I'm going to select my service account. In fact, I don't need to select it here. Instead, I can go to the OAuth 2 key and download. I already did that, and install client libraries. So we've got a cluster. We've got the access to code now in the UI. I'm actually going to hop into Intellij, and I'm going to show you exactly the steps you need to take this code and connect to this cluster. So here in producer and consumer code, I have a bunch of code. As I copy this out, I'm going to explain exactly what I'm copying. Let me go to Intellij here. I'm going to open up a second screen. So I'm just going to create a dummy project. I'm just going to call it B because I have so many projects with weird names at this point. So I have Java and Maven, and I'm using Java 17. So Java 17 is the recommended one. I'm going to go ahead and create the brand new project here. And on the other screen, it's asking me to do it in a new window. So here we go. So in the POM file, I need to make some edits. I'm going to actually hop over here. I'm going to move this off the screen. One of them was to add the Pulsar version as a property. And this, I'm just grabbing this out of the UI, that UI I showed you a little bit before. And then I needed to add in some dependencies. And that was basically the Apache Pulsar client. And then if I right-click this and go to Maven, reload project, it should download this dependency. I want to also create the producer and consumer code. And I see the question has come up. The recording will be available. Yes, we're going to upload it to YouTube. I'm going to do the SN producer code and the SN consumer code. The producer code I'm going to copy directly out of the UI. Because I was having some problems with my tenant and namespace, I'm just going to put these in as public default. And then the topic, I'm going to say my topic. Okay, but those should pre-populate if I was able to select them. And then in the consumer code, I know what I did. I deleted the org.example at the top. That's probably why I lost this here. There we go. And then you can see there's the key file path here still needs to be filled in. And that's, of course, that JSON file that I downloaded. And I need to place that somewhere and then reference it in this code. I'm actually going to find my downloads folder because I did. And I'm going to put it in my resources folder. And did that move it? Yes. And then it is kind of confusing here, but I'm going to do the full path. It's users, Dustin Ness, that's me, and then desktop, and SN. And then the project, and then we go into the source folder, and then main, and then resources, and then demo account.json. And I believe that's everything. Let's go ahead and test it out and see if this actually can connect. If there's a problem with this credentials URL, there's often a weird error that comes up that we'll see. Otherwise, let's see if we can actually produce our first messages if I've got any problems here. Not going to tell me. The file path looks okay. Let me see if I did anything wrong here on the code side. Give me just a second. In fact, what I think I'm going to do is try and use the server that we just spun up instead of the one I had previously. So if I go back over here, I have the instance dedicated to, dedicated cluster to. Here I can see public default. Let's go ahead and try this one out, the one that I have. We actually just spun up. I'm going to use the same Pulsar version and the dependencies. Let's go here. I'm going to select public default, create a new topic called my topic on this one I just spun up. I'll create a new subscription. This is on the consumer side. I don't want to troubleshoot that old cluster that I had lying around. Let me go ahead and copy this code out. I'll paste this exact code in here into the producer. The only thing I need to change this time is the path. So we're going to try users, Dustin Nest, desktop. Try this again. SN specific work. Intellij, B, source, main. Is that right? Yeah, resources. Now let's go ahead and try this out on our producer. Oops. So this is that server we just spun up, the instance dedicated to, and this is the endpoint. And there we're able to produce the messages. So What I want you to do is to be able to go in and spin up your serverless cluster or your dedicated cluster and then produce your messages. Here in the consumer, let me do the same thing and I'll try and consume the messages. And then all I need to do is get the key file path. And let's consume them. Now it's actually possible because of the way Pulsar works, I'll probably see the 10 messages, but it's possible they could get lost because of the way message retention works. If you don't have the subscription in place at the time that you produce the messages, they're not in a backlog anywhere and they're eligible for deletion. But once you get that subscription in place, which now I do because I've connected with the consumer for the first time, we've got that subscription in place. But now that I've consumed the messages, they're no longer in a backlog, they're eligible for deletion. So you'd have to set up message retention if you wanted these 10 messages to stick around. You go ahead and start up the producer one more time. We'll leave the consumer, actually, the consumer, I think by default gets 10 messages. I'll bump it up to 1,000. We'll go run on that. I just want to see you, or have you see it live, where you run the producer on the left and you get the consumer on the right. And that's really where we talk about that latency. Pulsar has amazing latency around producing and consuming. If I go back over to our presentation here, so I really do suggest creating your service or your org, using the $200 credit. I would suggest using the serverless option because it's going to be more cost effective. It's basically, you're getting charged mostly just on throughput. Serverless will always use the rapid channel, so that's going to get you the ability to use Kafka if you do want to test Kafka. If you do use the dedicated option, I would suggest to the rapid channel, but again, that runs at around $500 a month to run that cluster. If you go to courses.streamnative.io, in fact, I'm going to hop over there, and you go to that quick start for Pulsar and click on welcome. We've basically gone through this cluster setup section, which is going to be how to spin up a cluster and an admin service account. This hasn't been updated yet to how to do the serverless and dedicated options, but I'm going to be updating that soon. So I would definitely watch the video that we're recording today. I've got additional code samples beyond what's just in the UI, but this video here explains how to get the UI code samples. But then I'm going to introduce things like subscriptions. So by default, we use the exclusive subscription. But there are other subscription types as well, like failover, shared, and key shared. And this determines how messages get distributed to consumers. So when you have potentially more than one consumer connected to a single subscription in a topic, it can split up the workload, which is what would be like a message queue, for instance. Or if you need shared workload, but you still need ordering on a key basis, you can use something like key shared. So what I've done here in this Get Start quick start guide for you is I've recorded videos on what each of those different subscription types look like for a single partition topic, which is what you're going to get by default when the producer creates the topic for you. And as I mentioned earlier about message retention and messages getting deleted, this is a quick talk about message retention. I also introduced schema. Right now we're using byte messages. When you pull the code from the UI, everything is a byte message. But there's a lot of information about schema, schema registry, schema enforcement, schema evolution. I don't go into all of that in the quick start, but I do introduce you to string schema, JSON schema, and Avro schema. We also start to talk about multi-tenancy and how to increase the number of partitions in topics for when you need to scale throughput, and then how you can reintroduce message ordering on a key basis when you use partition topics. And then I go through and explain all of the subscription types again, but when you're using a partition topic, because some of them change in a little bit how they work. So it's important to know when you start to scale things, you understand how it works with the multiple partitions. There's also the quick start on Kafka. It also has information on how to create the free $200, or you create the cluster with the free $200 credit, a service account, and how to get sample client code from the UI. But that course actually has additional information that might be useful to you if you are using Kafka. There are examples of using OAuth 2 and JWT with, or actually we call it API key now, with the client.properties file for both producers and consumers, as well as schema registry. But I also introduced topics like Pulsar multi-tenancy when using Kafka, how to use a non-super admin account, the Pulsar and Kafka shared topics. So there's specific examples of when that can work. I have an example showing K-streams and also an introduction to Pulsar georeplication. So I go into my instance, select the tenant, the namespace. There's the option to go to Kafka clients now. I go to next. I can select the service account, but it's not going to be as critical. I'm not going to use schema registry. You basically just can add these dependencies into your code that we were using. If I go back to the POM file here and add in 2 more dependencies, I'm going to close out on my Pulsar consumer and Pulsar producer. And if I create, let me use a different topic. You can do shared topics, but there are some restrictions. I don't want to go into that now. So I'm just going to create another topic called my topic 2. I'm going to pull the producer code here for Kafka. And before I do that, actually, I'm going to copy this name. Java class, Java. I'm going to pull the producer code. Great to see, Chris, that you got the org up and running. Okay. And here I need to go back to the POM file and believe I need to load this again to download the Kafka clients. And hopefully all the red goes away. Okay. And then the only tricky part here is all this again is pre-populated. The only tricky thing is the path. The path is a little bit different on the Kafka code. And I believe I have all this in the course. You need the full path, but without the file : // So I think if you just use a double // so in the Pulsar example, I use a triple / users. If I just use the double with users and then my name and then go the full path, that should work. So go ahead and right click on that and let's try and produce our first Kafka code. So we did a one message right there. And then we do our first consumer code. And then message retention with Kafka examples is a little bit different. That's explained in the Kafka quick start. It will say running a few times here. I expect the message to make it across because it probably hasn't been deleted yet. It did just make it. So that looks good. I tend to then comment out this running equals false statement. So this just the consumer continues to keep running. And then I turn on my producer again. So they're just published. This may take a little while for the first time, but then once the consumer's running, it's periodically checking. So once it produces over here, it'll consume over here. Okay, let me go ahead and stop that. We'll head back to the presentation. And then I already did talk about the additional free content that is available in that quick start. So a review of the demos we were able to get done today. We've got the free tutorials to get started using Kafka or Pulsar protocols on StreamNative. You can create the StreamNative Pulsar cluster using the $200 free credit, either serverless or dedicated. For all new orgs, the serverless option should be available by default. It is available today. And if you do have an existing org that you want it available on that you haven't been able to find, please email me. So any questions about today's webinar, feel free to email me. If you give me your org name, I can probably work with engineering or tech support to get that enabled. We created the service account. Again, a super admin is very high privilege, but it's fine for testing purposes. But with Pulsar, you'd be able to then restrict it to be tenant admin or produce and consume on specific topics inside namespaces or specific topics individually. And then there is a bunch of code in the UI that is available for Kafka and Pulsar in a whole bunch of different libraries. But in the courses, I also have the sample code for how to use things like multi-tenancy and schema beyond what's in the UI. So if you follow along with this video, after today, I do encourage you to also go to courses.streamnative.io and look at these 3 free courses. Again, you can always go to the developer portal that we've created as well, which is even more information. And then if you do want to dive deep into the Pulsar Java client, because you like what you see today, we do have a 3-day paid training called Practical Apache Pulsar Application Development. It's extremely hands-on. There's asynchronous client code. So today I've been using synchronous code, which is not optimized for speed, but the clients, most of them have the ability to batch messages and send messages asynchronously, which is going to increase your throughput dramatically. There's also other types of message acknowledgements like cumulative acts, knacking messages, dead letter queues. There's a lot of message retention policies, seeking where you can move the cursor around, message readers, delayed messaging, schema evolution, all discussed in depth in that 3-day course. I also have a YouTube channel where with StreamNative where we create a ton of content. If you just go to youtube.com and type in StreamNative Academy, we have both a regular StreamNative channel and a StreamNative Academy channel. The Academy one has much more technical information with demos of how to actually do things. We also have in-person training. We have Data Streaming Summit coming up at the Grand Hyatt at SFO in the end of October. I'll be doing a hands-on training where we basically go through a lot of what we did today about Kafka and Pulsar, but we're also going to be doing a few hours of that training is going to be on AI-related items. And then we always suggest for anyone who is new or even intermediate or advanced with Pulsar, download David's book, Apache Pulsar in Action. I'm going to show some information on the following slide. There's a QR code that you can scan, but if you also just Google Apache Pulsar in Action free download, you can get a free digital copy. And anything we talk about today, if you have any issues spinning up your cluster, any issues testing out the Java code, the Kafka code, or any issues with any of the tutorials, I can help. Just email me at training-help@streamnative.io, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. For David's book, here is the QR code to get the free digital copy. David has a ton of amazing examples in there that I would suggest that you, actually a lot of developers read the book end to end, cover to cover. It is a very, very informative book. And then if you have anything that's more specific to technical requirements, after you've been testing it out and you want to know, oh, can Pulsar do this? Can it do that? But it's a little bit more specific technically, or you want to have a discussion about scaling your workloads because Pulsar is built to be cloud native. So scaling becomes a big question. Or if you have very specific security requirements because you're interested in knowing if one of our deployment options is going to work for you, that's when we would prefer or recommend that you talk to our sales department. They're going to get you set up to answer those questions, set up POCs, things like that. So if you go to streamnative.io/book a demo, that's where you can get in contact with our sales department. That's actually all I have for today, and hopefully you were able to see how easy it is that once you spin up either your serverless or your dedicated cluster with your free credit, how you're going to be able to get some messages or some code out of the UI to produce and consume your first Pulsar and Kafka messages, and then how you can keep learning using our quick starts. And then I'm available at the training-help@streamnative.io anytime to answer any of your questions on any of those. And again, sales is available for more specific questions to your applications or security needs.